Hey everyone, hope you're having a good day. Today we're going to go over Chapter 8 for financial accounting, and this is the chapter related to accounts receivable and notes receivable. And in this homework example video, we are going to take a look at the details of notes receivable and related entries. So, water closet company wholesales bathroom fixtures during the current year ending December 31st, water closet received the following notes. So on March 6th, they had a note for 75,000, term 60 days, interest rate 4%. And so we can see all the notes receivable that they received. And determine for each note the due date, the amount of interest due at maturity, the identifying each note by number. Assume a 360-day year. And then we have a couple journal entries to record. Note that we're not recording the creation of each of these notes. We're just recording the entry to dishonor note 3 on the due date. Yeah. So it looks like for note 3, the due date comes and then they don't pay. And then journalize the adjusting entry to record the accrued interest for 5 and 6 on December 31st. And that's because it looks like these are the only two that are due in the following year. And then journalize the receipt of the amounts due on 5 and 6 in January and February. Okay, so we have our work cut out for us. In the first question here, we have each of our notes. And for note 1, our due date is going to be 60 days after March 6th. And that's going to be May 5th. That's 2 months later, but um, March has 31 days, April has 30 days, and so you take the day minus 1, right? And then the interest due at maturity, we have 60 days, and so we're basing this off of a 360-day year. And so we need to take 60 divided by 360. Hold on a moment here. And that's 1.1667. And then we multiply that by the interest rate of 0.04. And then we multiply that by $75,000. And we get our interest due at maturity is 500. Here, I'm just going to share a bigger version of my screen so I can show you these calculations on my calculator here. And so for April 7th, the April 7th note, that's due in 45 days. And so that's going to be due May 22nd. And the interest on that is going to be $40,000 times 0.06%. And then we need to divide, that's the annual interest. It on this note, 6% would be $2,400. However, the note's only for 45 days. So we got to divide that by 360 and then multiply by 45. And we get our interest of $300. And then for the August 12th note, that's due in 120 days. And so our due date is going to be December 10th. And then our face amount is $36,000. We got to multiply that by our interest rate of 5%, divide by 360, and multiply by 120 days. And we get 600. And we get that 360 from right here. So you always want to make sure that you know how many days that the interest is calculated based off of. Otherwise, if it says by months, you could use monthly fractions instead of daily. So dividing by 12, multiplying by the number of months, etc. Now for number 4 here, October 22nd, 30 days after October 22nd, it's got to be November 21st because there's 31 days in October, right? So, and then we got $27,000 on our note. Multiply that by 8% interest. Divide by 360. Multiply by 30. We get 180. Gonna go a little faster here now. So November 19th, 90 days after November 13th, that's February 17th. And that's going to be, let's see, $48,000 times 0.3 times 3% divided by 360 times 90 days. It's going to be $360 due at maturity. And notice how these two are due after the end of the year. And then December 15th, let's see, would be 45 days after December 15th. It's January 29th. And then $72,000 times 5% divided by 360 times 45. We get $450. Okay, let's check our work here. Great. So this one was correct. Now we got to record some journal entries. So for journal entry number 3, so it says record the dishonor of note 3 on its due date. So the due date was December 10th. And so that's going to be our date. And what happens when a note is dishonored is it goes into accounts receivable because the amount is due to the company. We can't keep charging them interest unless there's something in the loan that says that we can keep charging them interest. But generally, right, the loan is now in default and we need to, if we're going to send it to collections or figure out some sort of way for them to pay it, either way, we need to transfer this note into accounts receivable. And So we have three, and we also had some interest over the period that we need to accrue as well. So we're going to have three accounts, and that's accounts receivable. So our accounts receivable is going to go up. That means that's our debit. And then we're going to have notes receivable. That's our one of our credits, and then interest revenue. And let's just make sure we got these accounts in our chart of accounts here. So we got accounts receivable, interest receivable, notes receivable. Perfect. And then the amount of the note initially was $36,000. So that's we have to credit our notes receivable by. And then $600 in interest revenue. And then our accounts receivable is going to go up by the notes plus the interest. Let's see here. Perfect. Okay. So now we're going to journalize the adjusting entry to record the interest on notes 5 and 6 on December 31st and assume a 360-day year. So very important point. This is not the full interest due at maturity. This is only the interest that has been accrued so far by the end of the year. And so taking a look at each of these, let's see, we have November 19th. So the days until the end of the year, November 19th, we have 31 days in December, and then we have another 10 days left in November. And then we have to multiply our 48,000 times 0.3% divided by 360 times 41. We get $164 for this first note. And I'm just going to write this down just to keep track of it. And then for our second note, we had December 15th, 45 days, 5%, $72,000. So there's going to be 16 days left in December. Actually, we should have done 42 days. So if we can go back here. $4 was our daily interest. And so $42 would be, or $44 interest per day, assuming a 360-day year times 42 days. So that's 168. And then December 15th, 31 minus 15. $16 days. Okay, so we have $72,000 times 5% divided by 45, or divided by 360 times 45. It's 450. Oh, it wasn't time. It'd be $10 a day times 16 plus 168. And then we get our interest of $328. Right? So we had $160 accrued for the 15 days at $4 a day, and then we had 42 days of interest at $4 a day on the other note. And so we're going to accrue interest revenue for this amount. And that's going to be a credit because credit increases to revenues or credit. And then interest receivable will be our debit. Right? Because the amount of the note is just the initial value of the note. We need to use interest receivable to keep track of how much interest that we're owed. Now, journalize the receipt of the amounts due for 5 and 6 in January and February. So we have two different due dates for these. The first of which, and we have that in our first question here, February 7th, the one due, so we're going to record the January 29th one first because it was due then. So January 29th. And right, we're receiving cash and we'll wait on the amount that we receive is the $450 plus the interest due at maturity of $450 plus the initial amount. So, and this is for note 6. Remember this, it's very important. So this is note 6, 72,000. So we're going to get 72,450 in cash. And then we have to reduce the initial amount, 72,000. As a credit to notes receivable. And then right, we had our interest receivable. And on this note, remember we had 16 days of interest at $10 interest per day. And that was $160. Remember how we calculated that for the previous question here. And then our interest revenue for the rest of the time, this is for the 29 days in January. 29 times $10 in interest a day is $290. But also make sure to double check that your journal entry is balanced. Our debits and credits are balanced here. See, 160 plus 290 is 450. And guys, that's super important. Because if the journal entry isn't balanced, there's a mistake somewhere, right? If it's balanced, it doesn't guarantee there's no mistake, but we got to make sure that our journal entry is balanced. Now to do the same for our next journal entry, we have 48,000 was our initial amount and then 360. So 48,360. That's what we receive in cash. And then our interest receivable was $168 at the end of the year. If you remember the 42 times 4. And then February 17th, we had 31 days in January plus 17 days in February times 4. That's $192 in interest revenue. And our journal entry balance is 168 plus 192 plus 48,000 is 48,360. So let's check our work. And there you go. We did it. We recorded all of the notes receivable transactions for this company. And so thank you everybody for watching. Good luck on the homework. And I hope you learned something about notes receivable today. Have a great day, everybody.